What's up, everybody? redracer1985 here, and we're going to do something a little different here today on this channel. And a lot of people in the YouTube community have made top 10 lists of, well, lists of any kind. And I know some people who thinks if I do a top 10 list, it may be about racing. It could be about favorite race car drivers. It could be about favorite music bands or groups or whatever. Well, my first top 10 list is actually not going to be, it's not really going to be about any of those things. Now, what some people do not doesn't even know about me is that I actually have been, if I could talk, that would be great. That I actually have been a fan of somewhat game shows in some ways too. This is going back to when I was a kid. And I've compiled, and with a lot of thought, I've compiled to in my opinion, my top, actually not really my opinion, but actually my top 10 all-time favorite game shows. Now this is combining game shows of what I grew up on back in the day, and some of which, and maybe a couple of which, I don't remember watching or even seeing, but thanks to channels like Game Show Network and Buzzer, I have, excuse me, I have actually watched some of those game shows and even liked some of them too. So, and I also got some honorable mentions lined up too, and just because some of them end up on the honorable mention list doesn't necessarily mean I didn't like the game shows. It's just so hard to fit all your favorite game shows you even liked into a top 10 list. So the honorable mention list is actually game shows I've watched and liked here, and because they didn't make the top 10 list, well, sorry, I didn't put them in the top 10. But anyway, it's just so many shows I've watched and liked, and so let's put it that way. So with that being said, let's move on to number 10. Let's start the list with number 10. Number 10 on the list, starting things off, is probably one of the few game shows, maybe the only game show that's on the list that wasn't even on when I started watching, or actually wasn't even on when I was a kid. That game show being Match Game. Now, of course, if you know which versions of each game show that I liked, if you know what kind of version of Match Game I liked, I actually mean the 70s version that Gene Rayburn hosted. This being the version that ran on CBS back in 1973 to 1982, and I thought it was a funny game show. Obviously, myself, for those who don't know now I'll probably give you an explanation for each game show that I have on the list. I actually have on my list for those who don't know or have ever watched game shows and what the concept was. Match Game was a show that we had two contestants, and of course the host itself would read a card of a statement to the 6 panelists that's on the show, and the 6 celebrity panelists would have to try to guess their own answer to fill in the blank. So, and of course, once they got done filling once they got done guessing their answers on the card, then the contestant would have to answer his or her own question, and to try to see if his or her answer actually matches any of the 6 panelists. And if they do, they get a point. If they don't, then, well, sorry for your luck. So of course, the contestant who wins the round gets to go on to play the super match, which would be, the $100 plus a $250 and the $500. And if his or her answer makes one of the 3 lists, they get whatever dollars they have. And then of course they would go on to the last match, which they would pick any of the 6 celebrities, pick one of the 6 celebrities to see if their answers match a certain statement that he gives out too. And so, well, and if they matched in, of course, they get the grand prize of the round, and they would go on to play another game. The contestant itself does, against a different opponent. So there's a lot of funny moments that came out of Match Game. Of course, then again, back in the 70s, in the 80s, there seemed to be a lot of funny moments that came out of game shows, But As far as the other versions of the game shows, I didn't know. The only other version I even watched a match game was, of course, the Alec Baldwin version, which I didn't care much for. So, but yeah, match game number 10 on the list, and that's also probably the game show only game show on the list probably that's on the top 10 list that was on when I wasn't even alive. So there you have it with that. That was more along the line of the game shows that my mom and dad grew up watching. Moving on to number 9 on the list, that would be here. This game show is a remake, really, of a game show that my mom and dad watched back in the day. If you watched Concentration, you probably know there was a game show where he had that two contestants. One of the two contestants would have to try to try to guess the puzzle on the big board, and of course you have like a tile of like a big board of like maybe 25, 30 squares or something like that, and if each square for each square you match the prize, you would if the prize is matched, then that's two squares gone from the puzzle. So I think that's how that game ends up. So it is, but no, it's not the original Concentration that's on this list. It's actually the remake called Classic Concentration, which is number 9 on the list. And this will be the version that Alex Trebek, the legend himself, hosted from 1987 to 1988. The original was done by Jack Narr in 1976, which I actually watched a little bit on Buzzer when I was taking care of my Nana back last summer. But anyway, the Classic Concentration, the 80s version, that was the one I was more or less familiar with and everything. So, but if the puzzle's solved by one of the contestants and everything, they would, he or she would go up on stage for the super match, their own version of the super match, I guess you could say. Now, in the 70s version of Concentration, of course, they would try to win one car on the stage. Well, in the 80s version, they had about 8 cars up on a stair step-like stage, and if you match, and for the match, you had like 16 squares actually. There are 4 columns and 4 rows, and if you matched all the cars in the time allotted that you got, then you win, I think, either 1 or 8 or all 8 of the cars. I forget which, that was another good game show I liked and stuff. So, and of course, it being Alex Trebek, that game show had to be epic, and that's probably the best game show I know of him hosting outside of Jeopardy and stuff. So, but I always like that game show. And by the way, rest in peace, Alex Trebek. So up at number 8 on the list is probably one of the game shows that I don't know if any of you remember watching, I guess, but yeah. Number 8 on the list is actually another game show that mainly ran probably before I was born, but, well, it's probably in between. It ran from 1983 to 1989. This game show is actually called Sale of the Century. And now this was a unique concept for a game show because, you had maybe a lot of question rounds and stuff like that in this show. And you occasionally would have a bargain you would bid for, or they would put up for bids, I guess you could say. Or actually not really for bid, but actually a bargain for you to try to buy, with a few kind of dealing, I guess you could say, from the host. And sometimes, and more often than not, if they would try to persuade you to buy the bargain, it usually was a no sale, because if you do buy the bargain, then that takes away however much money that cost you, and it subtracts it away from the total points you were earning the whole time. So If you got the question right, it was a 10 points added to your score. If you got the question wrong, I think it was about 5 or 10 subtracted from your score. That's how the scoring went. And then of course, you had the occasional fame game. Of course, you had that, and then of course the last round you had the speed round, which was 60 seconds on the clock, and you answered how many questions you had, and it gave a chance for the contestants that were second or third place to try to catch up to the leader, which more often than not, if not every time, the third place person never caught up to the leader and won. Never did. It was usually either first or second place competitor that won the match. So that was how the whole thing went. So the third place person was usually so far behind, and probably so far behind the handicap, I guess. But anyway, the winner, he would go on to the big stage. Now this happened. Now this format was the first 3 years of the show. This format of the show originally ran from 1983 to about the late part of 1985, when they would have about 3, maybe 4 prizes you would try to win on the stage, and along with the car. And then to top it all off, you had the jackpot that started. You had the cash jackpot that started at $50,000, which if the contestant passed up on the prize, you would have $1,000 added to the jackpot each day. And I've seen the jackpot actually go up to well over $90,000. I've actually seen it go up that high, about 90, almost maybe 95,000. I think almost at that point. And that's combining all the contestants who's passed up on the prizes and everything else to try to get the whole schmear. So, and I've actually seen it where the contestant would go on to the next show to where if he or she won the match, they would collect all the prizes on stage, and it would be showers of balloons and confetti going down. So that's pretty much how the whole thing went. Now that all was replaced by the big board in about late 1985. It was all replaced by the big board, to where you try to win win whatever prize that was on stage, and the cash jackpot was set at $50,000. No adding $1,000 to each day. So that was for late 85 all the way down to the show's ending in 89. The show was hosted by Jim Perry, who of course was mainly known for hosting Card Sharks. So, the first version of Card Sharks, which that one I also kind of liked too. And his version was well before my time. So, but it was but Sail of the Century is a very unique concept. I will definitely say that for sure. So, and Number 7, shoot me for you people who are fans of the show, because I have this one low. But it does not mean I don't like it. And yes, I know it's a classic, but 7 on the list is the feud itself, Family Feud. And now, if I had to pick which version of Family Feud, the first version of Family Feud I even watched was the Ray Combs version, which he took over as host, I think in 1987. I think it was. The show at the time was going on its 11th year. Family Feud actually all started in '76, and that was way before I was born, obviously. And that was obviously when Richard Dawson was the host of the show. And which, if I had to pick any version of Family Feuds I like, I definitely would probably pick the Dawson version. It was probably the best one of the bunch. The Combs version wasn't bad, neither. And stuff. Of course, all versions of Family Feud are all the same. It's the same rules, the whole thing, from Dawson all the way down to the current host and Steve Harvey. So, but the Dawson version is probably the best one. The Combs version I liked, and I also like I've seen some of the Richard Karn version. I've seen some of that. I don't think I've ever seen any of the John O'Hurley's. I don't think I've ever seen that, any of his version. And Louis Anderson I thought was pretty good as a host of that show. I thought he was pretty underrated as a host, to be honest. I mean, some say he was funny, some say he wasn't. So, and of course, we all know Steve Harvey's version is kind of funny as well, too. though in my opinion a slight bit overrated, because I mean they show when they show reruns of Family Feud, it's now getting to where that's all he shows is his version, especially on Game Show Network. And I know, and I understand now what Ultimate 23 Dragon was saying. She'd like to see more wide variety of versions of shows on Game Show Network other than reruns of the Steve Harvey Family Feud. So, but anyway, the Dawson version of the game of Family Feud was probably the best one of the bunch, and I would probably rank the Combs version maybe second, possibly. So, but Family Feud is a classic. You know, you got and I mean all versions. You know, Celebrity Family Feud, anything else. So, who doesn't like it? So up at number 6 on the list is another classic, and this one's another remake game show that I kind of grew up on. But number 6 on the list is the $25,000 / $100,000 pyramid, and this of course would be the game show that was hosted by another legend named himself, Dick Clark. And of course he's also known obviously as the man you usually saw every first of the year on New Year's Rockin' Eve. But anyway, I thought Dick Clark was a good fit to host that show. Obviously, no question about it. And the version of the pyramid I always liked was the '80s version. Obviously, which started I think it was in 1984, 85, around that range. I forget which. But it was one of the three, maybe 4 game shows that's on this list that was filmed in CBS Television City in Hollywood, or Hollyweird as I like to call it. But anyway, Pyramid, if you never watched that show, that worked like this. You know, you had 2 contestants, you know, with 2 celebrity guests, I think. And, you know, actually I think I may have been just 1 celebrity guest. I think it may have been just 1 celebrity that was on that one of the contestants got paired up with. But the first part of the show, you had a pyramid-like board, and that was you had a pyramid-like board with 6 of the boxes up there. One of them, of course, had the 7-Eleven card, which was 7 questions, for $11,000 or maybe $1,100. I forget which, but you had that. But one of those boards had the 7-Eleven card, 7 questions for $1,100, and the other 5, well, it was just a regular board. So, but it was a lot like. But you had each of them. But it was pretty much. It was pretty much pick the clue, and they give you 7 clues. You get 7 clues to have the other person answer or guess the word behind the clues. So it was basically almost like between the clues they give you and the fact you had to answer them without giving away the clue, it looked like a cross between Jeopardy and Password. So they basically have it with that. So they had a little bit of Password kind of into this whole bunch too, and the person and the couple who and the team who won the game gets to go into the winner's circle for the big round, and it was the same. It was again 6 clues. Again, it was 6 words you had to try to guess in like 60 seconds. And if you guess all 6 right, you win $25,000 or $100,000, depending on which version of the show you're talking back then. And both those, the $25,000 and the $100,000 ones, both of them ran in the '80s as well too. So when they first started the whole thing, I think it was like $20,000. I think that was when the first version came out back in the '70s. I think that was still with Dick Clark hosting it. So, but in each board each square up on the wall, it was a dollar amount from $50 to $300. You had a $50 box, a $100 box, a $150, a $200, a $250, and a $300 up on the very top. And I've seen contestants where they got the $300 board right, but didn't get all 6 of the questions. So that's how. And of course, so however many, if they didn't get all the questions, all 6 of the questions, then however much money they had on the board was, of course, the money they've won. So, but Pyramid, that was a very fun. I like that game too, and it was and probably one of my favorites I watched as a kid back in the day too. So, with the first 5 of the questions, or with the first 5 of the game shows in, it's time now to take it. So before we now take a look at the top 5 of my top 5 ever game shows, let's take a look at the honorable mentions, shall we? Yeah, you can't go through a game show list without mentioning Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. You can't go without those two. I would have liked to have had them in the top 10, actually, but I really didn't watch them all that much. I mean, I watched episodes of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. You know, who hasn't? So, both those classics there are very much a part of game show history and everything, and it's, you know, well deserved too. And of course, the thing I liked most about those game shows, they were true to their hosts and everything. Like you had Pat Sajak and Vanna White the whole time on Wheel of Fortune, and you had Alex Trebek the whole time on Jeopardy. So that's what made them both iconic classics of game show history. So, and both of them have been around since the early '80s as well too. So they both stood the test of time. And again, rest in peace to the legend, Alex Trebek. Here, I know you got a current reboot of Name That Tune, the version that Jane Karakowski hosts, which that version's not bad, but I more preferred the 1984 version that Jim Lang hosted, pretty much, because that was the version I watched a little bit on the Family Channel back when they used to rerun it on the Family Channel. So, you know, if you don't know what Name That Tune was about, quick rundown, I should say. You start off with you had 2 contestants. You start off with the round called Melody Roulette, and whoever won the most rounds of that game would go on to the final round of the segment which was the Golden Medley, where you had to guess 7 tunes in 30 seconds. Some people made it to all 30 seconds without a wrong answer, and some people unfortunately didn't make the whole 30 seconds and lost the game. So that's all part of it. So, but Name That Tune, and me being a music guy, I kind of liked it. So there you have it with that. Here, I had never even heard of this game show until Buzzer started running the episodes in 2019. And unfortunately, they don't run this. And unfortunately, that game show, unfortunately, at the 10 o'clock slot 10 o'clock in the morning slot, got replaced by Body Language, which I really haven't watched much of neither, to be honest. But Split Second, I thought was a very unique game show. I thought, you know, now there was a first version that came out back in the 70s with Tom Kennedy hosting it, and then. But his version was here in America, but the remake in 1980, which ran from 86 to 87, was actually done in Canada, Toronto to be precise, and hosted by another game show legend, Monty Hall. Yes, that Monty Hall, the same one who hosted who's well known for Let's Make a Deal. But I like that you had 3 of the answers, and the contestants who picked which answer he or she picked for the whole thing, you know, would have to guess the question would have to guess the question maybe, or what the person was all about. I don't know, but anyway, you know, like clue they would pick out would be Athens, and the contestant would have to say the capital of Greece. You know, that was that kind of game show. very unique, a very unique whole deal to the whole thing. And of course, the final round was, they would see how many, they would see where the contestants, what place the contestants were. So the contestant who was in third place, I think, got the least amount of questions. I think it was, and the second place contestant got the second amount of questions, and the leader got the most amount of questions. I think that's how it was. It may have been reversed. If somebody knows, let me know. It's been a while since I've actually seen reruns of it on YouTube. But and of course the winner got to go up to the big stage and try for the car, and he would pick 3 of the 5 numbers, and if the car was on all 3 of the numbers, then he or she would win the car. If even one square said otherwise, whatever the price was, whether it was a fox fur or a trip or anything else, then that was what he or she won. And of course, it being Monty Hall, and I actually like that he added a little bit of let's make a deal to this whole thing too, believe it or not, where he would make the deal of, now you can take the money, and you can go and go away from the show, and that's what you win, or you can come back to the show and try for the car again. So most of the ones, I think they said try for the car again. I think that's how it was, and some was content with the prize they had. So and of course another thing I liked about this show was that at least the Monty Hall version at least, was that they would always start with a brain builder question, like for instance, how can you break the sound barrier while you're standing on the ground? Which I was surprised the answer to that one was actually crack a whip, and geez, the more you know on that show, isn't it? Here. Family Channel and Lifetime actually had a thing with taking board games or games that we all played as family and turn them into game shows. And these two I thought were pretty unique examples. Yes, they made a game show based on the board game Trivial Pursuit. And if you've ever played Trivial Pursuit, then the rules of this game show was pretty much self-explanatory. It's basically the same rules as the board game, pretty much. Except, of course, I think he had 3 contestants, and asked up in questions, I think. Here. And Wink Martindale was the host of that show, too. And he was also host of the other family-type game that they made a game show of it. Now, this one was a unique concept. Nobody would ever have thought you'd take the game Boggle and make it into an interactive game. Well, in 1994, they did so. And again, with Wink Martindale hosting the show, too, ironically enough. This game show was actually one that was run on the Family Channel. Trivial Pursuit, but it was on Lifetime, I think, if I recall correctly. And I think, he had 3 contestants on the board. I think it may have been 4 contestants, actually, I think, on Boggle Interactive. And they would play the games themselves, and you at home could play with the touch-tone phone. And of course, now this is back when a lot of people got into this interactive thing, playing game shows interactive, I guess. Back when that used to be a thing, but a unique concept. I will definitely say that for sure. And who said it couldn't be done? And the last one on the honorable mention list was one of those game shows for the shopping lovers. This one was called Shop Till You Drop, and it was one of the 2 game shows I remembered, and I both liked, actually, like both of them as well. That I remember was hosted by Pat Finn, and I forgot. Well, it's been a long time since I remembered how Shop Till You Drop works, to be honest. But the stage I remember was set like a mall, and that was what was used for the final round, where the winning contestant, I think took the prizes hidden in a box and tried to guess which store it goes to. I believe that's how the last round went. And you can imagine, when the time they had allotted, they were running like mad to do so. And by the way, in case you're wondering, the other game show I remember that and like that Pat Finn hosted was his version of the Joker's Wild from 1990. Shop Till You Drop started the next year in 91. So with that all said, let's now get to my top 5 favorite game shows. We're now halfway through the list. These 3 players are after high stakes, but they'll have to avoid the whammy as they face the most exciting game of their lives. From television city in Hollywood, it's time to press your luck. Yep, that's my number 5 favorite game show of all time. If you watch game shows in the 80s, you definitely had to include Press Your Luck as one of your favorites. And that was a era. I don't know what it was about that game show, but I always liked it. You know, you had here. I know they got a reboot now with Elizabeth Banks hosting it, and of course the version you had before that was the one Todd Newton hosted, simply called Whammy, the all new Press Your Luck. And while those 2 versions are pretty good, nothing will beat the 1983 to 86 version hosted by Peter Tamarkin and announced by Rod Roddy, another game show legend in itself, and actually 2 game show legends in itself. Now, for those of you who never watched Press Your Luck had basically it was question round, then the big board, question round, then the big board, and then of course after the second round of the big board, the one who won the most money after the whole thing wins the game itself. And yes, this is where the game show, of course, where and I should mention about to get to the big board round, you have to earn spins, you know, to have control of the big board, and of course that's where the question rounds come in. You know, the contestants had to try to answer 4 questions. All 3 of them would try to answer the question, and if he or she got it right, they would earn the spins. If he or she got it wrong, then well, yeah. So, but and of course when it came to the big board, yes, this is where the game show, of course, where the contestants' cry would be, big bucks, no whammy, stop! And of course the last words you want to hear was Peter Tamarkin saying, stop at a whammy. And of course, as you know, the whammies, of course, were the ones that took all the money and everything you earned the whole game, and you're back to square one. If you earned 4 of those whammies, then unfortunately you're out of the game. So that was the harsh reality of Press Your Luck. But that was another reason why I liked that show, and not because it had that epic 80s feel to it, but and how I remember that game show, because most of it ran before I was even born. Well, I remember watching a lot of it when I was a kid when it used to run reruns on the USA Network, and this was back before USA became a network. That was nothing but NCIS and CSI rerun, and before it was nothing but NCIS and Law and Order reruns, or reruns that stupid Chrisley knows best. Here. Or if they ran Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, or Monday Night Raw and NXT, or Straight Up Steve Austin, which is pretty much the 3 things I even watch on USA, pretty much. But anyway, that's how I first heard of Press Your Luck, was when they used to run reruns on the USA Network back in the 90s. That's how I remembered it. And by the way, rest in peace, Rod Roddy and Peter Tamarkin. And you two created a very epic game show. We'll definitely say that. Now I'm going to throw you a little curveball on number 4. Number 4 on this list is a game show that was not produced by Fremantle Media, not produced by Mark Goodson, not produced by Red Grundy like Sale of the Century was, not produced by any production company, or should I say national production company, I should say, and this wasn't even on network TV, unless you had a local TV affiliate somewhere in Ohio, or West Virginia, or Kentucky, anywhere in the tri-state area, along the Ohio River and the Big Sandy. And I happened to pick this station up, and this game show ran on TV stations in Ohio, and actually ran on a TV station in West Virginia, WSAZ News Channel 3, which is the NBC affiliate in Huntington, West Virginia. And actually was also one in Charleston, West Virginia, too, believe it or not. And I actually have gone by WSAZ when I was at one time I was in Huntington back in 2019. Which game show is it, you might ask? Well, this game show is actually a game show from the Ohio Lottery named Cash Explosion Double Play, which is number 4 on my all-time favorite game show list. And if you haven't heard of Cash Explosion Double Play, please look it up on YouTube. I don't care if you don't live in Ohio or Kentucky or West Virginia. Please look up that game show. You don't know what you missed. I'll still explain to you how the whole thing works, though. Cash Explosion is, of course, you had 3 contestants on the stage, you know. And this show started back in 1987, although the double play version didn't start until about maybe 88 or 89. Here, the host of the show was Paul Topier and Sharon Bicknell. Topier was the host of the show that stood behind the pulpit. Bicknell was the one who stood well, let's just say she was basically Vanna White on Wheel of Fortune. Except the board that she worked on, she didn't turn the boxes around and gave you letters. Or she didn't touch screen the board and gave you letters. No. The board that Sharon Bicknell worked on Wheel of Fortune, not on Wheel of Fortune, on Cash Explosion, and I actually drew this out the best I could with all the drawings of the state of Ohio in the boxes, because that's how the boxes were designed. The board looked like this. That was the board she worked on. Okay. Now behind, of course, each of the 24 boxes that was on the show, you had four rows that spelled out play, and you had 6 columns that spelled out the word double. Hence, of course, the show. And the cash amounts behind the boxes were usually around $50 to probably maybe $300, $500 or something like that. Except there was a couple of places on the board. One that was hidden. Except there was a couple of special cards or boxes that was hid behind the board. Hid behind the board was either a double card, which also was followed by, she turns the box around again after what they told you. After they explained what the double card. Actually, there was no explanation. Double card was actually self-explanatory. Here, after a contestant gets a double card, here Sharon turns the box around again, the same box around again for the dollar amount, which of course, if it was say $300, and then behind the double card, then the contestant actually wins double the amount. And the other special card that was hidden behind the box was a bonus square, which I think was to my knowledge, I think the bonus square was like prizes. I think whatever prize they gave you, usually it was a car or whatever else they gave you for the bonus square. There, and there was no questions involved in this whole game too. It was very fun to watch and very fast paced. Some cases too. You have 3 contestants up there, and of course the contestant that won the most money out of the whole thing gets to play up on stage for the final round, which I don't remember what the final round of the game actually of that show was, to be honest, back in the day. But it was simply the 3 contestants that stood up on the board, no questions involved. It was a contestant's turn, the board would blink back and forth and everything, and the contestant would just hit the button like so. And Paul would go like, say the B column select, and then the contestant would say, if the contestant would say something like the A row, please. And he goes behind the A, and the amount would be say $300. So that was how that game show worked. And like I said, if you never watched it, I suggest you please look it up on YouTube. Again, it's called Cash Explosion Double Play. Please look it up. You don't know what you missed. Up Up at number 3 on the list is another game show that's every shopper's dream, and I'm sure a lot of us wanted to be on that game show. And of course, I'm talking about nothing but the phrase that brought you the phrase. When you're at the checkout stand and you hear the beep, think of the fun you'll have on Supermarket Sweep. And by the way, I'm not talking about the annoying Leslie Jones version. I know when I did the review of the reboot back last October when that debuted, I said I didn't really mind it, but the more I kind of watched it, the more I couldn't take it. So basically, yes, the version of Supermarket Sweep I'm talking about is, of course, the David Ruprecht version, which is the version I grew up on, and probably the best version of the bunch too, no question about it. You know, here his version of the show started in 1990. Actually, the original show was 90 to 95, and they brought it back on PAX, back when that channel used to be a thing, until about 2000 to 2002. And of course, a fun fact about that show, the announcer of that show, actually, when the whole thing started, was Johnny Gilbert, who, of course, was also known for announcing for Jeopardy. Until about middle of 2000, when he was replaced by Randy West. Randy West wasn't bad neither, as an announcer, too. But anyway, Supermarket Sweep, if you don't know what that show was, obviously, and I'll probably give you a quick rundown anyway, because some of you may already know what that is. You start things off. You had three teams of 2 contestants. It could be a mother-daughter pair, a father-son pair, a mother-son pair, or a brother-sister pair, a sister pair, a brother pair, or a best friend pair. It could be anything, basically, when it comes to this show. And the whole thing starts off with a simple question and called the mini sweep, which is a simple question, and whatever product the answer to the question was, then the second person on the team would have to find said product, and if he or she brought it back within 30 seconds, then they would get $50 for the mini sweep. Though now it was added about maybe a year or two later, it was added to where if he or she brought the product back in less than 20 seconds, then he or she would add an extra. Then the team would win $100 for the mini sweep. That's double, which of course is obviously double the amount, and it would be added on to their total in the big sweep. Now, it wasn't dollars or points they earned, by the way, for each correct answer they got in each round and everything. It was 10 seconds towards your added to your sweep time. Of course, he had about a couple more question rounds and everything when it came back to. It had one more question round before they got to commercial break, and there was 2 more question rounds. Then finally the round robin game, which was always scrambled letters, basically. That's what the round robin game was, and of course, it was like 6 or 7. I think it was 6. I think it was 6 clues actually. What it was, and after that round, then it was on to the big sweep, and the big sweep time usually ranged between like 2 minutes 40 seconds to maybe 3 minutes 10 seconds. I've seen the sweep time actually go up to about 4 minutes. Actually, I've actually seen that happen. But and that's, of course, the big sweep. Of course, is we have one person selected to run the big sweep itself, and they would be running wild through the aisles, grabbing anything you want from the store, 5 for a limit, and of course the contestant, and of course the team that racked the biggest winning total on their sweep wins the game and has a chance to go for the final round, which is find 3 products for $5,000. And of course like I said, it's basically they give you 3 clues to find the product. Of course if you find the last product obviously successfully, then you win the $5,000. A lot of people there's been more people that's won $5,000 than you might think on this show. Some people, of course, unfortunately didn't win the $5,000. That's all part of it. obviously, but she had a lot of $5,000 winners on the whole thing, and of course, so much so that we had a tournament of champions in some of the seasons of Supermarket Sweep. So, but an enjoyable game show and very fast paced. I will definitely say that too. And that game show actually ran on Lifetime, actually, in its original run. Yes, the same Lifetime that was television for women. Of course, nowadays it's really more of a made-for-TV movie channels, pretty much. So, anyway, Supermarket Sweep at number 3. Easily a top 5 game show, maybe on some people's lists, but very enjoyable to watch. Number 2 on my list is probably maybe one that's not really all that familiar to some of you guys, but familiar to maybe some as well too. And this game show brought the classic phrase, "It's the crossword game you played all your life, but never quite like this." Cue the crowd cheering, "Scrabble!" Yes, there was a board game. Actually, there was a game show that was based on the board game Scrabble. Simply entitled that. This was one of the game shows that was actually hosted by Chuck Woolery, who, by the way, is also known, who actually is mainly known for 2 and 2 Love Connection and Lango. Mainly known for those 2 game shows. Very few people know him for Scrabble. But anyway, Scrabble was another awesome game show. I thought was worth watching. The show started in 1984 and ran until 1990. And they actually brought it back one season in 1993, again with Chuck Woolery hosting it. And it was another game show that was hosted by Red Grundy Production, or produced by Red Grundy Productions, same production company that did Sail of the Century. And actually, the guy who announced for Sail of the Century, Jay Stewart, was the guy who announced for the first season of Scrabble until he was taken over by Charlie Tuna. No, not the Charlie Tuna who does the StarKist commercials. No. There's an announcer on it. There was an announcer that was actually named Charlie Tuna. And he actually is the announcer of the show when they brought back the show in 1993, and the revival didn't really last all that long, actually. So yeah. But anyway, Scrabble was, they give you like maybe I think 3 words, maybe 4. Actually, there's 2 contestants on the show. They would have to win 3 games to move on to the Scrabble Sprint. Or actually, it wasn't Scrabble Sprint. It was Speed Word, I think, is what it was too. They had the Speed Word round during the regular rounds of Scrabble, obviously, if you got 3 stoppers. And of course, now the stopper, obviously, the stopper happened, when you. I was trying to think how this went. Each contestant had 10 tiles. They would put 2 of them in there for 2 letter choices. If the letter choice is part of the word, as part of the answer of the word, then it goes in position of the word. If it's the first position, or if the letter actually ends in one of the pink or blue squares, and you want to go ahead and guess the word right, then you win about $500 to $1,000 actually, and the cash is yours to keep no matter what, no matter if you win or lose the round. Here, and of course, if the letter you pick is unfortunately not part of the word, then you get the stopper. That's how the stopper is actually happens on the show. If you get 3 of those, then if you combine for 3 stoppers, then of course it goes on to the Speed Word round to, of course, determine the word. And the last letter's not given before the contestant is answered, unless neither contestant actually gets the word, and it's so. Of course, it time's up though before a contestant wins 3 games. Then of course it goes Speed Word the rest of the way before the contestant comes up for the ultimate Speed Word round, which is I think, to my knowledge, about 6 or 7 words. and you have to guess it in the time as fast as you can get it and everything. So with that said, if first player gets it in, like, say 45 seconds, then whoever the winner of the second round of Scrabble gets to go on the speed word his or herself, and then he or she has to do it in 45 seconds or less, preferably less than 45 seconds, or however much the amount of time that the first player got. And if he or she is able to do so, then he or she goes on to the Scrabble sprint round. If he or she fails to do it, then player 1 goes to the Scrabble sprint round, obviously, which is, I think, 3 words for 10 seconds. And if he or she gets it in 10 seconds, then it's the Scrabble jackpot to win the game. So, a very enjoyable concept for a game show. I will definitely say that. And to me, one of the most underrated game shows of all time. And some of the ones on my list are very, very underrated. And Scrabble definitely is one of them. So, I mean, you may think of Lingo or Love Connection when you think of Chuck Woolery, but I always think of Scrabble when it comes to the game shows that he hosted. Some of you probably, if you've been paying attention to the list, you probably already know what I'm going to say for number 1. On everybody, come on down for The Price is Right. Let's be frank about this. What person does not have The Price is Right as their favorite game show of all time? That game show, much like Family Feud, much like Wheel of Fortune, much like Jeopardy, has lasted forever. You know. Now, I do know as much as I like the Bob Barker / Drew Carey Price is Right. I know the original Price is Right was actually done back in the 50s and early 60s with Bill Cullen as the host of the show. And yes, the same Bill Cullen who would host Blockbusters. But the version of Price is Right that we all know and love with Barker as the host, and then later Drew Carey, started back in 1972. And it wasn't made into an hour show until about sometime around 76 or 77. I forget which year. But anyway, of course, we all know how The Price is Right works. You know, it's 4 contestants to bid closer to the actual retail price, so they can come up and play a pricing game, whichever it was, whether it be One Away or Lucky Sevens or the Mountain Climber game, or of course everybody's favorite, Plinko, or any other obscure pricing game that they've had on the show over the years. And of course the winners, regardless if you win or lose the pricing game, you still are eligible to come up to the big wheel for the Showcase Showdown. So after the first 3 games in the first segment of the first segment of The Price is Right, then it's 3 players. The first three of the pricing game the winning bidders go up for the Showcase Showdown, and of course to try to get the $1. If nobody goes $1, and then the one that scores the highest without going over goes on to the showcase, to the point where you hit to its wash, rinse, repeat for the second segment. Then it's the second round of the Showcase Showdown, and the second winner goes on to face the first Showcase Showdown winner for the final showcase round, which is basically, they give you 2, maybe up to 3 prizes, including maybe a car, possibly. In most cases, it usually includes a car, and sometimes it doesn't now. Then he or she would have the bid closest, what they think the price is without going over. And player 1's the only one that can pass it along to player 2. And once he or she passes that showcase to player 2, then the other showcase player 1 has to take the showcase regardless of what it is. And there ain't no passing that neither. So But once you take the showcase, you can't pass it. So that's basically how it is. And of course, the same thing goes along. If you guess close to the actual retail price without going over, you win the game. And unfortunately, I have seen the only result that and unfortunately many times I have seen the only result of the showcase showdown that I do not like, and that's the double overbid. Then again, who doesn't like? Then again, who does like the double overbid? But anyway. So, Price is Right, much like I said, much like Family Feud, much like Wheel of Fortune, much like Jeopardy, that's another game show that's probably stood the test of time. It's the most iconic classic of all game shows when it comes to the game show realm. And the one thing I actually did like that when Drew Carey took over back, I think it was in 2007, 2008, I forget which year he took over, but in which I actually had a laugh when I heard Drew Carey took over The Price is Right, because I thought to myself, the last game show I remember him hosting was Whose Line Is It Anyway? Which is another one of my favorite game shows, by the way, too. But but when I heard Drew Carey took over as host, I thought that was quite a contrast going from Whose Line to The Price is Right. But the one thing I actually did like that he did on the show was that he kept the Barker tradition of keep your pets spayed and neutered, and I actually like that. So yeah, that's my number one. So that's my top 10 all-time favorite top 10 game show list. And what are your favorite top 10 game shows? Please let me know in the comments section, and I like to hear what all you got. So so with that said, here this is redracer1985. Catch you later.